I think the first thing to talk about is what is research? And it's this really tricky question. Let me say that there's really two axes by which people define research. And most people think about only one of the axes. So one axis that everyone talks about is what is the subject that you're studying? I mean, that's pretty easy, right? So I'm researching economics, I'm researching in biology, I'm researching in computer science. So that's important because it allows you to understand what are the topical areas and types of knowledge that you're interested in. But one of the areas that we find at Lumiere and that I found as well as my PhD and working with other researchers is that people often don't think about the way research is conducted, whereas that actually is in many ways the more important facet of what research is because it defines really how you live your life. Before diving into these different types of research, let me just say one thing, which I think is a really important misconception to address directly, and that is that scientific research does not just mean lab-based STEM research. You know, there's research that's happening in any variety of fields, anything from, of course, our lab-based research STEM areas, but to business research, that's my area of expertise, economics, to literature, to dance. You know, there's research actually to international relations touches a really broad number of subjects. And so when we think about research, if your passion goes in an area that's not necessarily STEM, you absolutely can do research. And in fact, that is, we'll talk a little bit about how research can help you stand out in missions, but research that is unique and distinctive can even help you stand out even more. So we'll talk a little bit about that later on, but I just want to quickly go over what are the four main types of research in terms of the methods that you would use. So the first, which Namita is going to talk about and has deep expertise in, is lab-based research. So this is research where you're in a lab, you're really focused on trying to find causality. And the way that you find causality is by creating an experimental setting in which you're changing only one variable or at most two or three variables in order to understand what is happening when I change something. So you're trying to get a causal effect. These lab-based research can be quite intensive. They generally, because of their structure, they don't necessarily require as advanced, say, quantitative methods, so they can. This is increasingly happening in different biotech spaces because the experimental structure itself already proves out causality. It proves out why is something happening in the world. So that's kind of lab-based research. Quantitative research, so that's like, I think, how often people think about it. Pipettes, lab-based research. Quantitative research is a large field. It's actually my area. I studied statistics in undergrad, and now I apply data science framework to understanding how businesses work. But essentially what you're trying to do quantitative research is that you are using existing or creating new data sets to try to understand something that's happening in the world. And one way that you do that, and economists are very good at this, is by finding shocks in the world. So an example of this might be the coronavirus. So the coronavirus has changed how we all work, how we all function. It's shut down economies. Some economies have not shut down. Those types of external shocks allow us to get at the data and allow us to get at what is happening in the world. And many researchers, economists included, business researchers, are having a kind of a field day right now with coronavirus as an external shock, what we call an exogenous shock, that allows them to understand more deeply what is happening in the world and how do humans, individuals, and systems work. That's around quantitative research. Theoretical research is about thinking deeply and critically, and generally with a very strong form of logic to address a question. This could be, for example, the classic of research of a mathematician, someone who is trying to solve a problem, but has to just think about it. And an example of this is the field medalist Ngo Bao Cho, who's this mathematician at University of Chicago, heralded as one of the greatest mathematicians of our time. And he talks about how he spent 7 years just thinking about how to set up a question in order to answer it. 7 years spending how to set up a question. Now, that doesn't mean that, as you do research, it's you're in high school, college, grad school, that you're expected to spend 7 years on it. But you can think about the rigor gone into it. He did not use any data to answer the question. He's using fundamentally logic, in this case, mathematical logic, to address a question. Political science, you can see his philosophy is actually very common to see this type of theoretical research. And then finally, qualitative research. And qualitative research is so much fun. this is about going out in the world and speaking with people to get at a question that you have. So this might include, for example, if you're interested in gender disparities in a certain field. So for example, we want to look at gender disparities in finance for the Lumia Research Scholar Program. She is going to go out and talk to different women and men in finance to understand their experience. And this is very much around the skill sets needed here is much more abstract thinking, ability to categorize information broadly and put it together into a synthesized form. So we'll move on from here, but as you think about research, I think the main points are twofold. So one is that research extends far beyond just these STEM fields. In fact, it goes to many different areas. And two is that as you think about research, think critically about what type of research and what method of research excites you. Because you can have a field, but even within one field, I give the example of economics here or political science, there can be multiple types of research. And so those are really the two questions you need to answer when you're thinking, oh, what should I do when I think about research, and what exactly is research? And when I think about research, I think there's three broad areas that research can help you in your admissions. So the first is differentiation, and we talked a bit about that, but to put a fine note on this, when you think about what a university is looking at, they're looking for essentially someone who's going to thrive in their school. For universities, the highest level of academic achievement is not receiving a perfect test score. No one is a tenured professor because they got a 36 on their ACT. It's that they can do independent, thoughtful research on important questions for the world. So when you show that you've done research, that shows a level of rigor that goes beyond your high school program, your college program, even your postgrad program itself. So it's a real differentiator that's quite valuable. Second is that it's useful for your CV, of course. This, again, can show you that, hey, I've done something, I've created something in particular that's quite useful, that's independent results. You can highlight who you've worked with in that process. And then finally, and this one I think is really important to highlight, is that when you work on research, you are developing advocates who are then going to work for you. So for example, when I applied to PhD programs, and the exact same thing happened when I applied to undergrad, the people who wrote on my behalf were all my faculty members who I did research with. There were three different professors, three different research projects at Harvard. And for our program, for example, it's all about this one-on-one or small group relationship between an individual mentor and a researcher. And it's very common and very normal to ask for your research mentor to write you a letter of recommendation, because thinking from their perspective, the only way they got to where they are today is because of this line of people who did the exact same thing for them. And so as an academic, it is one of your core responsibilities to support people in their journey. So they're very excited about that. So you connect with future advocates. Now, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just want to say that, if you have done research at a young age, whether at the high school level, it also shows that you understand the value of it, right? So a group of students that are typically applying to, say, medical programs in the UK, where you can, go straight to right after you finish your grade 12. Yes, of course, you need to show that you have, had work experience. You understand the qualities that a doctor needs to kind of be able to conduct patient care. You need to show that you're compassionate. All of that is very important, of course. But another aspect that really helps is if you've actually been able to have access to some kind of research, because that connects the dots really well. And professors like to see that. Universities like to see that you understand that, yes, being a doctor is important, and that, yes, you have to know anatomy, you have to be caring and have all those skills, but you also understand that there's a group of people who are doing a lot of research that kind of then that impacts the future of medicine, and how do you kind of take that research and then bring it into the pharmaceutical industry, or bring it into like drug development. And that's a very important part that I feel students tend to miss on if you want to be a competitive medical applicant for UK universities. In the US, medicine is a postgraduate program, but at the undergrad level, this is really, really valued, that if you have had time to kind of work with the professor or understand the process of how research is done, for drug development or for understanding the structure of certain compounds. It's really, really looked upon very highly if you're applying to any kind of biological programs or even medicine in the UK. I just wanted to kind of mention that, Stephen.